2018. Please join me in the pledge.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening to those of you watching at home. This meeting is being recorded and televised by Chelmsford Telemedia. There is no one else present who is recording or planning to record at this time. All right, we don't have any minutes. I asked Colleen about that. Dan, what do you do when your committee ends? What do you do about minutes? Like with the Charter Review Committee, did you go back and have a late session just to kind of clean up on the remaining minutes?
No.
Did they just get
Oh,
released
wait a
anyway?
minute, wait a minute. I think we were missing the last one.
Yeah, it seems like you'd inevitably be
Yeah,
missing at
yeah,
least the
it
last
always-
one or two.
Why can't you do it by email?
It just appears.
No, you can't.
I don't think you can
Well-
do it by email, but
I think you can have a session at the selectmen's meeting and just
Yeah,
have some
you
meeting,
can-
call a meeting,
You don't need to call it,
whenever,
10 minutes
you don't need to
before.
call it an open meeting.
Yeah.
I wouldn't.
right, okay. So I asked Colleen to look into that along with wrapping up the minutes, and we'll do whatever it is we need to do. Okay, discussion of the final report.
I liked all the changes in verbiage that you
Okay,
had. I
good.
think the only thing is style, from my perspective.
Yeah,
It's
that's
just some of the graphs and,
Oof. I need to make sure that the formatting's the same. That looks like a different font.
oh, well, you just copy what I had. No, you,
I,
no,
you-
you, yeah, it is a different font.
yeah, that mostly came from
Because I
you.
use Times Roman.
I did keep the,
Yeah, there's
The-
one
the
phrase,
survey
and that's
of-
fine,
yeah,
yeah,
it's
that's
got the
fine.
color.
And where you said
Oh,
especially
yeah.
with the requested,
You can look at
Yeah.
this.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
yeah, that was good.
okay.
There was one thing in
Yep.
the first, I think you added something right at first.
What page you
Under,
on?
This is page 4.
yeah, it's under the introduction, just a
Yeah.
small thing. I think, study the use of split rate in other cities and towns, including a survey of actual shifts implemented by other cities and towns. I don't think you need to say that again,
Let me see.
Yeah, okay.
that's all.
Just
And-
implemented when first adopting,
Yes.
okay.
And then that 2.5 was spelled out, in numbers. There was that bolding on the 1/2. I don't know where it was. It was at the beginning someplace.
Oh, yeah, you know what? I remember seeing that too somewhere.
Yeah, what page was that on?
Oh, right, here it is. 8, tax levy calculations. It just, needs to be unbolded.
Yep.
I do have the market approach. I don't know if that got sent out at noon or not. I changed the language there a little bit based on some recommendations from Frank and Sam. So let me read through what I have.
What page?
No, I'm sorry, this is page 5.
Thank you.
The fourth paragraph under assessment. So down at the bottom of the page. I have, the question of what a full and fair cash value is for a given property depends somewhat on the nature of the property and is determined by using 3 different methods. Massachusetts law requires the use of at least 2 of these methods to determine value for a given property type. For residential properties, the cost and market approaches are used, in parentheses, income approach cannot be used, end parentheses. And for commercial properties, all 3 approaches are commonly used.
Makes perfect sense.
Okay, I also have some of the initial language on the market approach changed. Sales prices of properties comparable to a subject property are considered good evidence of market value. So that first sentence I know
This
is a
is the
change, and I
change.
think,
Next page.
that's it. Market sales of similar properties in the year prior are analyzed, compared, blah, 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 through January
Okay,
1st.
this is the one that corresponds
Yeah.
to that, and so it's not in red here, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
If it's stuff that Frank recommended, I'm not even gonna check it.
yeah, I feel the same way. The email came from Sam, but I think it's
Okay.
the two of them. So, then no other changes on the
On-
rest of page 6 or 7?
I didn't see anything along the way.
Mary, how do you like that, the split rate, page 10?
I wrote it.
Oh, you wrote that all? Okay, that explains it.
Most of it, no,
That's right, yeah.
I'll tell you, I mean, we talked about that last time, and the reason I did that was because we keep talking in terms of how much you're gonna shift
Yeah.
to commercial. So
Yeah, I
wanted to
agree.
I wanted to talk about it in those terms.
And I think it makes more sense to
And
start off
start off,
that
and
way,
then-
which is right.
And then I used the term residential factor
Right,
in there.
later
since-
on,
Later
right.
on. That was- Although I didn't go through the whole business, I then calculate what the residential factor is, but.
Right.
But the thing is that you're choosing how much to do the shift to commercial.
Right. Good.
Okay, on, at the end of that section on page, I have it
Oh,
on
yeah.
13, there's a fairly significant addition. So the language, again, Sam forwarded me the language from the 2004 and 2005 reports. What's in quotes there is in the 2004 report. It was quoted that way in the 2005 report.
That's
The bottom paragraph I wrote.
The 2004 report was,
Hello?
oh, there's nobody moving back there to keep it on.
That's pretty bad. I've never seen it go off like that.
Yeah. There must be a way you can keep it on.
All right, I got it. I can see from this side. Oh,
Okay.
You must have moved far, you moved far enough. Where's the trigger for that? We need to wave our hands every once in a while.
We did that through charter review. It's like we're always waving, right, Dan?
The 2004 report that you're talking about, is that the one the state did or the one that was
No.
done in Chelmsford? You might,
It says report on classification in Chelmsford. Should I say the 2004 Chelmsford report on classification? It's a good point. I hadn't thought about it.
what did you say?
So Mary's pointing out that there's a 2004 DOR report on classification.
I believe that's when it
Yeah.
was, and so I want to know.
And this is a quote from the Chelmsford report written in 2004. If I put Chelmsford in front of 2004
Yeah,
Okay,
and take it on and just say that
Period.
Chelmsford 2004 report on classification wrote.
okay. I guess if it's the report on classification in Chelmsford would imply that Chelmsford, but
I agree, it could be unclear.
it could be unclear, okay.
We did go around a little bit about whether or not businesses used more or less services than residents, but
didn't
I
study
think
that.
I think it's fair to say that we didn't find a disproportionate use by them.
Reduce the burden.
I don't think that's fair.
No?
No, I think your condos don't have the same thing, and you've got more condos than you do businesses. And we don't get the same things. We get garbage,
Right.
that's
But
it.
that's what I'm saying, that you're not using more municipal services.
And
Oh,
what was
okay.
implied,
I
what was implied in here was
Yeah,
that the
that
businesses were using
Somehow are
more.
using more, they're
Yeah.
getting more benefit from the roads or something.
They
I
are,
mean,
is what I'm saying.
well, I think you can, there's an argument to be had there, there's a debate to be had. We kind of got into it, I don't feel like we really resolved it or went to the end of it, but I do think that, at least in the context of when they did the classification first time through, we heard Mr. Johnson say that the kind of the justification at the time was they were sewering, right? And the feeling was the businesses were getting a disproportionate benefit from having the sewers put in at town expense. And we're not that sort of thing is not happening at this point, and I can't think of anything comparable to that.
Oh, okay, you do have basically comments relative to 2 and 3. Okay.
Yes, right. And
And
then,
they're
the
all right.
inequities of property
Property
valuations is very much what the 2004 and 2005 reports were about. And again, I feel like we can say pretty clearly that we feel like the assessment process is actually
Okay.
resulting in full and fair cash value. So, the next sentence, the committee did not find any legislative intent in the law as written. That's me being argumentative. We can strike it if you want, but I feel like when people say you need to consider the legislative intent, my answer is no, you don't. You need to do what the law says you can do. It doesn't matter what was in the minds of the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee on Beacon Hill when they wrote this law.
Back
What-
in 1998.
Yeah, 1998. What matters is what the law says you can do and what it says you cannot do. That's the only thing, as long as you,
Yeah,
it says you can have a split rate, you don't have to justify it.
Right.
As long as you stay within the limits, like, there are limits to how far you can split the rate. You can't put the entire burden on CIP properties. So and if you go beyond that point, then you have a problem with the law itself. As long as you stay within those bounds, you don't need to justify yourself.
So you're suggesting striking the last 2 sentences?
Well, no, I'm suggesting leaving them in, but I'll admit that other people may have different opinions on that.
I think it's an override.
The only thing is, when you're reading it, what do you mean by legislative intent? You're talking about what was in a report, you're not talking, are we talking about, I guess we talked about the reasons in the initial implementation of the law or voting, but that was a legislative intent, or a possibility.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering whether.
Yeah, so I either need to expand on it or
Well,
strike it.
I think either you chuck it or you expand,
Then I think just delete the sentence.
delete it.
So then we would, I think we could just delete the last 2 then.
I mean, under the historical stuff, you're
Right.
talking about it adopted classification to allow towns to manage the levy shares and does not restrict municipalities' intent.
Right.
And you can establish
Okay.
any reasons, so that would imply the legislation didn't have any intent.
That's true. So we don't need to have it there. It does come back up in the final summary, but I think you're right. It's there in
That's
the,
both
I
sentences
think
then?
both sentences, because we can go back to it. You're right. It is in the roundup under the
So
78.
essentially, what that paragraph is, we're saying these were the justifications, we're saying this committee didn't find 2 or
Right.
3 to apply, and implies that then 1 or 4 could be cited.
Could be cited as a justification.
Yes.
Again, I think, we'll come back to it in the summary where I basically say you don't have to have a reason to do it.
Okay.
The conditions, I don't think anything changed there.
I have something on 11.
Yep.
Down the bottom, 2011 Verizon New England, does that
Yes.
have to be capped, or should it?
It's just the way it came out
Okay.
of the cut and
That-
paste.
that's fine.
I
I
can
mean-
uncap it.
It just,
Where,
The court case.
this is the only thing that's initial capped.
your page
11.
11.
Might be page 12 on it.
Okay.
2011.
I don't know.
Oh, here it
Yeah,
is.
right down at the bottom.
It's bottom page
Yeah.
12 on this.
Yeah, that's
copy.
on mine.
Okay, that's okay.
But it doesn't change anything else, it's just the
Right.
format.
Okay.
All right,
So, this, I'm not certain I totally understood it all the way, but the these two charts, the minimum
Yeah.
and that's the minimum that the tax rate can be if you did a 150 split?
That'd be,
1.5. I'm just-
the line here on the residential chart is the 0.65 limit. You can't,
Oh,
right?
okay.
You can't pay less than
Yeah, okay,
0.65.
okay.
And on this side,
Yeah, okay.
yeah, the lower line is actually the uniform rate, and the upper,
Okay,
the
yeah.
upper is bound is the 1.5, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I actually stole that chart from the Worcester Research Bureau
Oh, okay.
report. Although ours looks different than Worcester's. Net effects of a split rate, so I went back and added a little bit of language about the tables themselves. And I just said, for the second paragraph under net effects of a split rate, before the first table, reads now, the first table is for all residential properties and shows that with a shift of 1.1, the residential property owners save about 2.2%. For larger shifts, the savings would be proportionally greater, e.g. a 1.5 shift, the maximum allowable by law would result in a savings of approximately 11%.
You know, I don't know how this will come out in the end. The problem is that
I know.
it would be this, because it looks like this belongs with that table. And I know that we're still adjusting.
Well, I
in-
think
in-
there
in the-
might be enough space to put this over here. If I
Well,
put this underneath the table, would that work
Well,
better?
all I'm saying is, well, of course, you've got this table, you're not gonna,
Yeah,
and when, you know, we're
there's just a lot of white space.
above there,
some of
we're
these
getting rid
pages.
of other sentences, so that shifts,
Right,
shifts how
things move
things are,
around.
but in the end, I think, yeah, even at the expense of more white space, you wanna have the paragraph on the same page as the table it applies to.
Okay,
Whether it be at the top or the bottom, you
Okay.
want them together.
okay. So once, yeah,
Once you,
we'll make the final corrections and then put everything
and then
together.
figure out yeah.
Yeah,
Spacing.
okay, and then figure out the spacing, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yes, then on the next page, underneath that first table before the second one, the text was changed to, the next table shows the effects of a 10% split rate on commercial, industrial, and personal property taxes. Compared to the savings on the residential side, the increase in taxes on the CIP side is greater, a 10% increase against the 2.2% savings on the residential side. A $500,000 residential property saves $202 in, I need a space there, in taxes. And an equivalently valued $500,000 commercial property pays an additional $898. This is an unavoidable byproduct of the imbalance in the CIP share of the overall valuation of the town. If the CIP share were 50%, then the savings and increases would balance. Do I need to say residential and CIP shares of the overall valuation?
I'm not sure about that, but if you're gonna take the page 16
Yep,
and put it with this,
yes.
then you need to take.
That'll go,
Yeah.
yep, then that'll
Okay.
go with the next one.
Oh, yeah, I think that's what we were saying. We want
Yeah,
the paragraph to go on the same page as the table that's talking
I'm
about.
not sure if it automatically would if you have
Well,
to move it.
that's the
what I'm-
question is,
It can be done
you
manually.
might have to force it. you know,
Right,
Yeah,
right,
might have to
right.
force it, but see what happens.
right.
Whichever makes it clearer, this, when you were talking about CIP and residential.
Yeah, I think it does make more sense to keep them together like that.
Okay. Back
We're-
on page 15,
Yep.
mill rate is there,
Oh, dang, where?
sorry. But
On page,
the
no,
graph,
he fixed, on the
Oh,
newer
the-
version,
the-
the
yeah,
newer version, here,
I
I
thought
did
this
this
was.
late morning.
he did.
Yeah,
he
this
did
is, I left the charts for later just
Okay.
because I needed to let people have a
he's-
chance to think
on-
about
on
what I
the
was
ta-
writing.
yeah, on the tables, he's changed that, and so the table now looks like this.
I see, okay.
it does say-
All
I
right, oh,
checked
that's very nice.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
And it does look like. So I need to fix my table. Oh, if that means I have to totally take it out and fix it in Excel and import it back in,
Oof.
Ooh,
Oh, yeah.
Well, if it comes to that, then just leave it the way it is.
I'll see
Yeah, if-
whether it, I don't, there may
Start-
be a way to do it within, Word. I'm just not
Yeah, yeah.
a person experienced in doing the current versions of those programs would know how to do it.
Yeah.
Not necessarily.
My skills on these programs date back a few years.
I think,
Okay, so,
And then this table, you want to left justify
uh-huh,
them so
okay.
that they, oh, yeah, I guess you want to set, well,
That's
you,
fine.
you want to left.
so that the
it'll be
numbers,
easier for
however,
left justify.
whatever it works, right, you want the numbers to line up.
Yeah.
Yeah, instead of just being centered, right.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think there are any significant changes there. We decided we were just gonna leave these big hairy graphs and then put full-size versions in the appendix, right? Is that
yeah,
what we decided?
we thought that was fine, because
Okay.
it's so difficult to read this way.
Actually, now,
Well, it looks better.
it looks
Your
better,
printer.
it looks better, it's
That's
easier to
my
read,
printer.
but,
Yeah, you know what, it might be partly a question of printer quality.
yeah. But the point, well, you've got it in the color there in black and white, then you can't tell which town goes with
Right, you still can't tell.
Well,
Well, we can have them print in color, but we talked about this, at some point, it's gonna wind up in black and white.
well,
I don't
that-
know, if you guys think that's good enough, then we could just delete that appendix, because I don't have anything else to put in that
There
particular one.
isn't really, what's this just trying to show, that they cluster together?
Yeah, that they look a lot the same. So, but there is some extra verbiage there.
Which
um,
is-
So you have the first sentence underneath it, right? And then, in addition to that, with the exception of a few outliers, most of the communities saw CIP valuation growth between 0 and 100% over the 13-year time frame, landing between 1.0 and 2.0 on the charts. Readers may question whether specific towns are truly comparable to Chelmsford. The committee certainly did. Ultimately, the choice was made to include this data set because the committee decided no two towns are truly comparable. There are always distinguishing circumstances.
I wonder if there's a, what do you
All right.
What do you have to do to get it on? Just-
Even the lights are tired of us. All right.
We all get to the same spot.
Yeah, is it a way to
There,
just,
yeah, if there's a timer or something.
Maybe you need them all on for them to stay on. The ones behind this are not on.
in the same toggle.
All right, well, let's see how it goes.
otherwise we'll make Helen moved out. And then she could sit
Bring
there
us-
and wave every time they go out. Okay,
The committee decided no two towns are truly comparable. There are always distinguishing circumstances that impact a town's economic development. The value of charts like this, and it should probably be these, lies in the demonstration of the stochasticity. That's,
is that a word
No,
that,
it's not.
it is, but it can't be a good
This
one.
is
That's
like
A
pretty cool.
demonstration, how about variability? And as a counterpoint to the apparent inevitability of declining CIP values, I could really use an editor, implied in the equation above. The assumption in the equation, all things being equal, is rarely true in the real world, and the range of outcomes amongst other towns with similar CIP shares, whether using a single rate or split rate, suggests that those other real-world things may have significant impacts on a community's business growth that equals or outweighs the choice of a single or split tax rate.
from what I understood of it, it was fine.
Well,
No,
I really feel like that could be a little bit cleaner, but
So when you say real-world things,
yeah. We could at least say real-world effects. I'm trying to,
effects. Did you get my?
I did.
That's okay, there's been a couple of places, not only you, the difference, and I had to look at
I have-
dictionary to make sure I
To
knew
make
which.
sure, right,
Yeah.
which-
Lately, I have to do it every time.
One is a verb and one is is a noun,
Always had problems with that.
yeah. Circumstances for things.
yeah.
Instead of real world things.
Just say real or
Yeah,
circumstance.
Circumstances.
It's better than things.
Things make sense to me, but
Yeah.
That's what we
It
want.
worked for me.
We need that.
Well, maybe because we're using the assumption about all things being equal, maybe,
Oh, well, that's true. It
That's
calls
probably why
back
you
to that
got
a
it.
little bit. Yeah, I'll bet that's what it is.
I mean, given that you've got that in there, it might be fine just to leave things in there and maybe in parentheses, you know, in quote marks.
That's an idea too. All right, I'll stare at that. I'll stare at that a little bit tonight. But you're gonna have the final. You're gonna have the
No,
final
I'm
call
gonna
on
leave
that.
whatever you decide. I'm not gonna touch that. I'm not gonna touch that.
Okay, so I need to add a key to the chart.
Which is which?
Oh,
Which one is?
Yeah, right.
I
That's
know,
what
but I'm asking you, which
the
one?
hatched is, or the striped is Billerica,
Oh, okay,
which you can see from the maroon and
right, but I
green
can't
in
see
mine.
it. Right, I can't see it from this one.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, I changed somewhat remarkably, or I wrote somewhat unexpectedly. Chelmsford has a higher concentration of commercial and industrial properties, and I need to add in the total valuation of the two towns.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking of that almost
Yeah.
as part of the graph, but the key, I don't know.
I wonder, yeah, to put the number and value of the
Yeah.
totals in there.
It
I'll
wa-
see if I can get it in and
in
keep
the,
it
just in the
legible.
key, just
Yeah.
where you have the key, and then said Chelmsford
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
valuation, anyway.
right.
Okay.
So pros and cons, I added one under pro, which is potential tool to manage the levy split, respond to market variations. We went through that. Did we go through that last time?
We
We
talked
did.
about that, it was
Okay.
proposed,
Okay.
and all of what you added here,
Yeah.
those are things we talked about at the last
Under
meeting.
the cons, 1, 2,
I still have a
4.
problem with the third to the bottom.
yeah, I thought you were gonna say that.
I do, I don't see where it fits in here.
Yeah,
It's-
well, so wait, let me get there. The one right above it may not be compatible with economic development strategy now, as opposed to whatever we had before. May negatively impact business donations. Yeah, I mean, we took the one about it causing fights between residents out.
Yeah,
I think Tom really seems to want it in, or he felt strongly that it.
Okay, but I
Should
want
be in
things in
there,
here
but-
too, but they're not gonna go.
Well, I'm strong for keeping it in. I think
You
it's an
are.
important issue. I just don't know where we have data to support that.
That's what I'm saying,
Yeah.
there is no
Well,
data
my
to
problem.
support that.
Because we haven't had a split tax rate.
No, because you haven't had the taxes that are coming in 2018, and that's gonna make a bigger difference than the split tax rate. And that's what I keep saying about having that in there. If a business gets a lot of money and they need a write-off, they're gonna do the donations. If it comes down to the fact that they don't, and it has nothing to do with our tax rate, whether it be single or split, it's what the federal is. That's the deciding factor. It's not gonna be us at all. It's not gonna be the town's tax rate.
I disagree.
You think it's gonna be the town's tax rate versus a federal tax rate?
Well, it could be both, but I certainly think it's a component.
Okay, I don't,
I don't think
okay.
it's likely to happen no matter what, but.
I don't either, that's why I'm saying, I don't think it
I-
should be in there.
But
Because then businesses are gonna come out and say, but see, that was in there, and they're gonna say to the selectmen, you shouldn't have done it because now we're not gonna give any money. You're giving them the idea.
That's a threat.
And it is a threat. It is a threat that they've made to
You
us.
can call it whatever you like.
Right, and he stood up there and said, and if we get a split tax rate, we're taking Chelmsford to court. I mean, he said it clear as can be. He said it before.
Well, and you don't want,
Well, we don't have that in there as a con.
I know,
because-
but I'm saying it's the same thing, that you're
Yeah,
putting
no,
in, you're
right.
putting it in there, and you're giving businesses the idea that, well, I don't have to, hey, look at, if we don't do it, next year they're gonna change the tax rate, because they'll go back to split if
But
if
didn't
it's
that-
single.
but his comment, didn't that back us support this line?
Who?
The comment that was made, that's a supporting factor of that
Who
line
made
item.
that supporting?
The person that you were talking about,
Tell you the truth.
yeah.
Well, then you might as well put the other in there too, because if you're
I
gonna
liked
go
the
on-
other one too, but
that we're gonna sue you if you do it.
no.
I miss
Are you
it.
talking
That
about
too was a
the-
threat, by the way.
It was, that's
RV?
what I'm saying, they're
I
both
love
a
it.
threat.
I love when lawyers come in and threaten you.
And what he's,
I've
Right.
lived that for
Look at the
17
sparkle in
years
his eye.
on the Board of Appeals. Come and bring it on.
right.
I never lost a case at Superior Court.
Right, I don't think it should be in there. I really am strongly about the fact that that was brought out when that person that was standing at that podium, was standing at the podium when the business community had their, discussion with the people who were running for selectmen. And that was a question that was asked. That has no place to be in this, because we're out of that. We're out of that. So, anyways, leave it in if you want, but I don't think it should be in there, and I don't think it's fair.
it's,
And I think it gives, I think the only people it's going to give any credence to is somebody in business who is having a hard time making a living.
But they're not gonna donate anyway.
yeah.
I agree with you, but that's what they're gonna say. I agree. And Tom's not here to put it in, so we can take it out.
Well, I think
There's something to that. I mean, I'll try to respect what he had to say, but
I'm not saying it because, I am saying
I
it
think I
because
think I
there is
understand where you're coming
nothing in anything we have done, we didn't hear it from one person standing at that podium unless it came out of what the business people were saying to us.
Yeah, I said that a long time ago.
I know.
Nobody showed up here
But we've been speaking
with
about
any
it.
facts.
We've been speaking about it amongst ourselves.
And saying it's not valid.
I
I've
have not
always
been
said it.
saying that.
Oh, I've always said it's not valid. Because they need,
Oh, I think
They need
it's
to-
valid.
I don't know whether it's,
I can talk both sides of this
yeah.
one.
okay, all right, then leave it in then, okay, all right. I'm not opening a business, so I'm
My
not gonna,
point last week, last Friday.
Monday, this Monday.
Monday.
Yeah.
Unethical and Tuesday.
Yeah.
What day is it?
Tuesday.
oh no. Today's
My
Thursday.
point about it being unethical and unprofessional was not correct. I probably shouldn't have said it that way. But I may not back off that position. I've come to the conclusion
I think,
after a couple of days, it probably ought to be there.
okay, I just think that
Where
everything
it
in.
says may, I think that's,
Okay, that's enough.
fine.
Okay,
Okay.
all right, leave it in. That was my argument for the evening, it's done.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Maybe we'll get out of here in 10 minutes, keep going.
All right, potential loss of value in the CIP sector. Tom would argue that if he were here. He'd tell us it's inevitable. And then the higher commercial rates could discourage reinvestment in property, and that kind of is a late ad based on what we heard Tuesday night.
I think that is true. As a possibility.
Okay. The summary got expanded rather a lot.
someplace, somewhere, on what was, on one version where I saw page 27, was the non-word regressivity.
No, that's-
Regressivity
we
is
changed it to
non-word.
regressiveness.
It should
right?
be, well, I don't know, was it changed? I was looking at a version
I-
that still said
okay.
regressivity, and I don't know which.
I'm sure I changed it to regressiveness at
Okay.
some point today.
Okay.
We'll see, all right, we'll keep an eye out for it.
It was somewhere, I mean, I wrote down page, I think it was the version that I was looking at on the computer this afternoon. It was page 27 on there, but, which should,
Yeah, it should be right here, but
Which should be
let's
in-
see when we get there.
okay.
Is that in the realm of irregardless?
No, it's, I don't know, but I mean, I went again to the dictionary and I said, is this a word? And I could not seem to find it, so,
But did you check the Scrabble dictionary?
no, I didn't.
Or the crossword?
Or the crossword dictionary? I mean, any thoughts on this
This whole thing is new.
paragraph and
and
a page?
I don't
Yeah,
have
I
any
mean,
problem with
Should it, should 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines down on page 25 have 3 zeros after the 1, or just 2?
the residential factor, I believe, is carried to 3 places, or maybe
It
even
is?
4. I mean, we
Oh,
could,
okay.
we
All
could
right.
make it 1.00.
Because I've only seen everything.
At the end of that first paragraph on page 25, the board could choose a residential factor of 1.000. We could just say 1,
1.00.
or 1.00, since
You ought to be
later.
consistent.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
when-
next,
when we're talking about shifts, like you've
Yeah,
got
we normally-
1.50, so do two
yeah, okay,
two
Right.
decimal points.
Yep.
right. Frank will be more specific than I am, but that's okay.
Okay, I see, here's one where you have 3 decimal points, okay. And up above the sentence, you had no decimal points.
No decimal point at all, yeah, so that should go to 1.00. Okay, so then, several things to consider. The first is that due to inequality between the residential and CIP shares, savings realized by homeowners are less than tax increases passed on to commercial owners of similarly valued businesses. The next is that unless a split is constantly increased, the growth in residential taxes will be similar to growth without a split for a year. That is probably not quite correct. For subsequent years.
Over time, well, it's true, that's what my
Right.
12-year history shows.
Right, and that's what I'm trying to call back to.
Well,
Right.
just say it as it is, the growth.
Yeah.
Sake.
I'm thinking there should be 3 different sections so that they're separate. Yay.
Maybe it
must
just
have
never occurred
something
to
to
him
do
that
with
the
here.
selectmen would have a empty
You
meeting.
got all the way to there that time. It must have something to do with here. Because I always get to hear when it comes on.
Well,
We did this every night.
Maybe
with
you're just
charter.
more reliable.
Did you? Oh, okay.
Except we had that filled, and if everybody
Oh,
waved
yeah,
their
uh-huh.
With
hands,
their hands, okay.
it seemed to work. Need to put a string on that first chair.
There you
Give it a
go.
little,
yeah, that's right.
little tug.
Where were you just saying that? What sentence were you just
So
on?
into the second
Yeah.
big paragraph, right? Looks like the second sentence is, another is that over time, unless the split is constantly increased,
That's all right, go ahead.
the growth in residential taxes will be similar to growth without a split. And I think I should put in for subsequent years there.
Let's see.
Because you will see
Yeah.
that, you'll see
Yeah,
that
the
drop the first year, but
the
then.
first year.
What I was thinking about was when we looked at those curves, they take that decline, but then they pretty much just track whatever else would happen. And then The other side of it is homeowners will save money every year compared to what they would have paid without the split, but it may not always be perceived that way. A review of other communities with similar CIP shares doesn't give conclusive guidance on whether a split would be good or bad for business property values over time, probably because other factors outweigh the threat to those property values from a higher tax rate. In fact, an increase in local property taxes is just one of a number of costs of doing business. That goes back to Amina Langford, right?
Okay.
However, the community did find that while typical split rates in other towns average around 1.50, the initial splits implemented were much lower, around 1.08 to 1.10. That's just a little bit wrong. The overall average is very much correct, and those initial numbers are also correct. The thing is, those initial numbers are taken from towns that instituted a split rate between 2003 and 2016. Which means all of the big towns like Boston and Lowell were already at 1.50. So we didn't see where they put their initial split. The
So it
average,
didn't measure the whole thing.
yeah, the
Only
average,
measured that increment.
yeah, because that's all we have
makes
the
it
data
almost-
for.
right.
Well, if you go
Yeah.
back, if you go back and look at that chart, you can see it looks like the average on the chart of the places that we looked at for the initial rate, just eyeballing it, is probably closer to 1.2 to 1.3 than 1.5. I mean, I think the point still stands that nobody goes to 1.5 right away, or certainly
You know,
nobody in recent time.
The other problem in a sense is talking about the rates average around 1.5, where we have talked about the fact that implementing now, the maximum is 1.5.
Right.
And we haven't, and I don't want to
Yeah.
talk about other communities there was a point in time when they were allowed to be more than 1.5, some are currently.
still are,
And that's
right.
why they average 1.5, but
Yeah, there's a lot of 1.75s
I know,
overall.
but we haven't talked about this. So I'm just,
So maybe I should replace that 1.5 with the actual current average of the towns that we found in the survey of initial rates, which is,
That's
like I
it.
say, probably going to be more like 1.25 or so. It still makes a point that you want to work it up,
Yep, it does.
but you're right. That 1.5 is a little bit skewed.
it's a little deceptive in
Yeah.
what, I want to say, how can it
Right.
average that if that's the maximum
Right.
it can be?
Right.
So think about how you want to.
Yeah, I will. So I'll wordsmith that a little bit.
Wordsmith that.
And then this is most likely due to concerns about the effects of large rate increases on local businesses. The committee recommends that if a split rate is to be implemented or removed, I might just take that out of parentheses, it be gradually changed to the final desired value over a period of several years. This requires a long-term commitment from the Board of Selectmen and a political ability to manage the strategy across turnover of board personnel, or members maybe is better.
Yeah.
Rapid shifts, whether up or down in the split rate, will cause rate shocks either on the business or residential side and should be avoided.
Very true.
I'd like to see this split apart, because these are really, it's all important, but I think it's easier to read if they're split apart, like the first would be underneath indented just a little bit. When implementing a split tax rate, there are a number of issues, and then you go to the number of issues, the first, and then the second would be another, and then the third would be the committee recommends. Does that make sense to?
Yeah, I think
Okay,
certainly the committee recommends part, that
Yeah,
should be
okay.
a new paragraph. I don't know about,
Okay.
where else would you see another break?
Well,
The
the-
first and then
yeah.
another, the 1, 2, basically, the 2.
and even the review of communities with similar CIP shares on whether or not it's good or bad.
Okay,
So the number would be
Yep.
3, 4.
yeah, okay. That would give us, that would
Mhm.
split
Or-
this into four.
Yeah, that, you're right,
Four
it breaks it
sections.
up a little bit.
Or-
It's just not quite such a block of text.
Or would you have 3 and then bring it back to the margin, the committee recommends that if a split rate, because that's, that'd be too much.
I'm just thinking.
You know what, I don't have time.
I know,
This is where if we had another week, we could, it would look
That's
better.
fine.
You don't want some, you just want them to start like a new.
Yeah,
So that there's a
do.
little line,
Just so it's set aside.
Just a little
line,
bit,
a
yeah.
line between
yeah.
the blank line.
It's easy enough to start breaking
Okay.
that apart.
That's
Breaking
fine.
it up.
Yep.
New paragraph, I
Yeah.
guess those are paragraphs.
Okay, I don't think anything changed under small commercial exemption, although I did find a class 1 floating around somewhere. I had to change that to
I don't know
residential.
where my word regressiveness was. I didn't find it.
I think I have.
You may have
It's
changed it.
highlighted.
You can search it, search for
Yeah,
it. when you-
that's good.
Yeah, I can.
But you know what? It won't be in there anyway. It'll be in the residential exemption. So the only thing in that section, I did change the, I took the red out of
Charts.
the numbers,
Okay.
so they're just in parentheses and black.
I like the red.
You're killing me, Dan.
Okay.
Sorry.
The only thing is that final paragraph, after the first sentence, the increase is much smaller than the savings for the eligible properties because in a reversal of the split rate effect on CIP parcels, the number of eligible properties is much smaller than the pool of ineligible properties. Yeah, what I'm trying to get at there is that if you implement a small commercial exemption, it costs so little that you almost don't see it on the other properties. It's the closest thing to a free lunch that we've come across.
Okay.
Under cons, I changed the second one just at the end to say, if implemented without a split rate, some commercial owners would pay less in taxes than residential property owners with similarly valued properties.
Okay.
Yeah, somebody caught some messiness in residential exemption, under conditions of the residential exemption, that first sentence in the first paragraph, had there were some cut and paste things going on. So now it says, the property must be the principal residence of the owner as of January 1st, as used by the taxpayer for state income tax purposes. It must be the taxpayer's domicile, that is, his fixed place of habitation, permanent home, or legal residence. Okay. No real changes here. Dang it. I have to take this out. Okay.
And again,
What?
we've got the
Yeah, the paragraph thing.
no, wait, which table does this, first table,
This,
the second, okay.
yeah, that needs to go together with that.
There's something before and after
Yep.
this table,
right,
okay,
that.
Yes.
okay.
Do you want me to put it more together like that? Do it the other way, where it's just everything, all of the discussion goes up above the table?
I don't care how you do it, all I care is that the discussion pertaining to a particular table, whether
Yeah.
it be before or after, they'd be
Be
all on the
attached to
same
the table.
page.
Yeah,
It's consistent with if it's before or
Yep.
if it's after,
Yeah,
that's
before,
all.
or this, on this one, it's before and after.
yeah. Well, so in the, for the non-owner occupied one,
But you have to wait till you've finalized everything, that's why this
Yeah.
happens,
right,
yeah.
okay. There it is, regressiveness on page 37.
Ah,
Whoa,
On page what?
I wrote 27, but it's 37, is it there?
I have it in red as regressiveness.
Okay, you changed it.
Okay, the open space exemption, we just,
That's just
Pass over
copied from
quickly.
something. And I don't even-
the
didn't
various
even read all this.
exemptions, there's not much. John caught in category 2, the hardship exemption. In FY 18, 3 Chelmsford households applied for hardship and were granted a total of $950 in relief. He pointed out that it was a little unclear whether it was $950 each or for all of them.
Okay.
And then in category 6, another catch from John. Chelmsford has adopted the increase in the eligibility ceiling, sorry, this is the second paragraph under category 6, has adopted the increase in the eligibility ceiling to $40,000, but has not changed the interest rate. That is correct. We are still charging people 8% interest.
I don't know why anybody would want to do that. It just,
Just because of the 8% or because you don't want to give away your house?
I think most people don't want to give away their house.
What-
It's like a reverse mortgage.
Yeah.
It is like a
It's like-
reverse
yeah.
mortgage.
And you say, why do you want to do
Yeah.
it? But they advertise reverse mortgages all the time, so,
Yeah, well,
so, anyway.
People
Right.
get them.
And people
Well, some people-
We've got 'em in our,
to get
you know.
them.
I think,
if you're 85 and you need a few bucks and your prognosis is not going to make 87 or
Yeah.
95 to 97, that's the only time it makes sense.
yep, that's correct. I agree.
Okay, well, you've got
Well-
something.
And you've got no heirs
We-
that care.
well, you know, you're talking
Well,
about
that's,
that.
I think that's the thing, right? It's messing up
Because
your
the bank
intergenerational
goes,
transfers.
bingo.
A few years ago, a friend of mine's father did it, and he died within 6 months. He took out $25,000, and they owed $45,000 by the
Tax is
time.
enormous.
Within 6 months.
Better off
Yeah,
taking a
Yeah,
equity loan.
yeah.
All right, there's a typo under category 10, the senior circuit breaker tax credit, in FYF 15. It should say last year data is available. I just found that now, so I'll fix that. Okay,
You need a T.
yeah.
The T fell off.
The T, the T wandered out.
Okay.
Other exemptions not adopted in Chelmsford. Under the double personal exemption, the last sentence should be in plain language, the town can double exemptions, but it must do it for all eligible taxpayers and will not receive reimbursement for the additional relief granted. Implementation of this exemption requires a vote of town meeting. The approximate budget implications of adopting this exemption are discussed below. I guess that's a couple of sentences. The senior circuit breaker exemption, so that's been rewritten. This is basically based on our discussion Tuesday with Frank.
Okay.
So basically, the town can choose to grant exemptions up to that amount for people who are eligible for the senior circuit breaker tax credit. The last one, cooperative ownership. I need to format that a little bit better.
This is the one where you say we don't know what it means.
Yes, so I put the whole text back in there, just for fun. And so now it says, the text of clause 55 reads blah, 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 blah. And then after that, after I finish quoting it, I say, the committee found this unclear, and at the time of the report, the committee was not able to understand the implications of this exemption. If interested, the reader is referred to the Board of Assessors.
No, it's good. I like that.
You should have opened with
Well,
that.
and I think they
Yeah.
didn't- I think they didn't
Oh,
understand it
gosh.
either, did they?
No, I've talked to Frank about it a couple of times, and I'm not even gonna
It has
speculate
something
on
to
what
do
it
with me
is.
getting right here.
There may be, yeah, I don't know. He's in conversations, I think, with DOR, but I'm surprised they haven't gotten straight back to him on it. It may be that they don't really understand what it is either. Okay, net effects of exemptions. I tried to punch up the font size a little bit on both of those graphs.
Okay.
They seem to be legible now,
Yeah,
Yep.
I can read them.
more or less.
Are they done in, well, they're gonna be done in color?
Those will be done in color. The
Yeah,
printer
okay.
at work ran out of color. Just before the pros and cons, I have a sentence, adopting the senior circuit breaker exemption in full, 100% benefit, would require the town to set aside at least $850,000 in additional funds in the overlay account. A more realistic number, at least in the first year, would probably be $1 million. So that's based on what we're seeing here in the,
Yeah.
it's running between, you know, 850 and
That's enough to
900.
get the town not to adopt.
Yeah.
Well, that should certainly get people's attention. I mean, they could choose to give a lesser percentage, but it's real money. No changes in the pros and cons. In the summary, after the first paragraph, I wrote a couple more. Additional exemptions or increases in current exemptions that might be considered by the Board of Selectmen would include raising the personal property deduction from 5,000 up to as much as 10,000, and allowing an additional exemption of up to the amount of the senior circuit breaker tax credit for seniors who meet the eligibility standards for the tax credit. These increases and exemptions will not be reimbursed by the state and would reduce the available tax revenue for other budget items. In addition, town meeting could choose to increase the current allowed exemptions by up to 100%. Once again, these increased exemptions would not be eligible for reimbursement by the state and would be money lost for other purposes. I didn't talk about, like, the National Guard or the,
Right.
I mean, what's the other one, the senior in-law? I figure it's enough that if somebody really cares about it, they can start a conversation with Frank, but the big money items are these.
Yeah,
Yes.
and that'll be the day that Frank won't be in work.
Well, that's the co-ops. All right, additional approaches, multiple shifts. I have I will put those together as well as I can. After the first paragraph, residential property owners would see their taxes go down by about 2%, the same as with the split rate only. Does I need to be 2.2% because I said it in the first one, or is it enough to say about 2?
About
About two.
Fine, about two.
The small commercial exemption has no effect on residential rates. Commercial property owners with lots eligible for the small commercial exemption would see a change in outcome compared to just a split rate, with a minor reduction in taxes on their commercial properties compared to the uniform rate.
That goes back.
And then finally, industrial and non-eligible commercial property owners would see, that's already there.
Okay, and then,
Okay. And then both the small commercial exemption and residential exemption together with the split rate. I got the headings right on that, finally. But no changes there. Under other considerations, oh,
I'm just. Split rate, store commercial. You know, is there really any purpose, in a sense, and you could, I understand multiple shifts, but since the small commercial exemption portion only affects commercial, and the residential only affects residential, why are we doing all of it for, you know, I guess I'm saying you could do with two less tables. Or three less tables.
I don't think so.
Can you just add a column?
No, but I'm saying that, I mean, when you're talking multiple shifts, the table on page 50. Okay. Let's see. Is the same as the table that you show only when you have a split tax rate, because that shows the effect on residential
Right.
properties when you have a split. The fact that you have a small commercial exemption has nothing to, doesn't change that. So this table is the same as when you have a split only. And the ones that get affected, that do change, are the commercial properties. In the next section, when you have a residential exemption, that does affect residential properties, but it has nothing to do with commercial properties. so that their tables should be the same. Well, there you're showing it with the 3 in, so their tables are probably exactly the same as this. Where is this one?
So should
I
so
don't
instead,
know.
I should do the commercial the split rate plus a small commercial exemption and just show the commercial tables.
I would think so.
And then do the split rate plus a residential exemption and just show the residential tables. And then say, if you wanted to do all 3 together, the tables would be the same as
Yeah.
what you've already seen.
I'm just,
Yeah.
and I'm
You're
trying
talking
to,
about these tables, my tables are not the same.
well,
Well,
Same.
now let me see.
right,
All right, this one's the same as
this,
this.
right, it's the, so
But
if
it
you
does
look,
change all the way down. You go, it changes their numbers.
if you,
Let me see.
well, if you look at the,
I'm doing something wrong then.
no, you're not.
I almost
If
thought
you
I'd
look
be,
at
have
the,
table A, table B, table
The
C.
commercial eligible parcels table, there's one on page 51 and another on page 53.
Yeah,
So those are the same,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, I
One
see.
is, one is a scenario where you have the split
Okay,
rate plus a
okay.
small commercial exemption, the other is split plus small commercial plus residential. But yeah, Mary's point is that since the residential stuff doesn't mess with the commercial stuff and vice versa, maybe it's simpler, or at least there's fewer tables floating around.
Yeah.
You can still kind of show the difference in behavior if you just focus on either the residential or the
Right.
commercial side, but,
Okay.
Yeah. This
or
is
that might be more helpful, yeah.
53, this is, yeah,
More
so,
clear.
so the 2 tables on 51, on
Yeah.
page 51, are exactly the same as the
Right.
tables at the table at the bottom of 53 and the
Yep.
one on 54.
okay.
And the one on page 50 is actually the same as the table that was way back when we
Right.
first showed
Yeah.
the effect of the split rate.
No.
Well, that's
it's
what,
not.
that's the one I said you could do without, but, yeah, the one on 51 is,
This one is not.
that's.
Oh, it is. I see what you're saying. Yes, you're right. So we could do without, right.
If,
Yep.
I'm just
Yeah, because you're right, the small commercial exemption
I'm
doesn't
just
affect residential.
wondering along the way, and I'm looking back at those other ways, and maybe it would solve the problem with, if you labeled them table A, table B, and then when you could say, when you did the write-up.
Right,
In
go back.
in table
Yeah,
A, such and
right.
such, and then if they didn't end up on the same page,
Yep.
you'd at least know what they were referring to.
That makes sense.
I can't wait for you to tell your daughter that you can't spend time with her because you're doing the tax thing after you spend the
Oh,
airplane ticket.
I'm gonna have plenty of time with her. This needs to be done tonight,
Oh, you're
because
staying up all night.
they want it for the packet on Friday. That's why I'm dropping it in your lap tomorrow.
And I'm gonna get it to, I don't have time tomorrow. My day is totally
Okay,
booked
okay.
tomorrow.
All right,
If I have the weekend to
I
to
tell you what,
do
I
this-
tell you what, then what I'm gonna do, I'll send it to Christina, but I'm gonna copy everybody on it, and just, even if you take the weekend, just go through it. If we have to file an erratum or something on Monday night, let's just make sure
You're
that
gonna
nothing's really.
present it to, well,
I know,
Well-
I would love to have another week to
well,
just
I don't,
fine
I
tune
mean,
it.
if you want me to look, I absolutely, I do things all day Friday, so.
Right, it's
during the
fine. So
daytime.
but if everybody takes a weekend to read through it, we've gone through it a couple of times now. I
Yeah.
don't think there should be any surprises.
No,
But if something does get mislabeled at the end,
We can have
whatever,
the
or,
final, say the
changed.
final version will be
Exactly.
available Monday
Right,
night. This
right.
is the current
yeah, this is
draft.
the draft version
The
for
current
the packet.
draft.
Okay,
Sorry,
that's a good
folks.
idea.
and then are we gonna speak about how you're gonna present it, or?
Yes, we probably
Okay.
should.
Because there's an awful lot here
I know.
that's still missing.
I was-
And you're not gonna be able to go
Oh,
to bed.
Oh.
you mean
The
the,
appendix,
oh, yes,
appendices
that's
and all
true.
of that. You wanna
Well,
go to
that's
bed
true. I guess
tonight.
we don't have to give them the appendices. The appendices are 50% done.
Okay.
And if we got rid of those two big,
Yeah,
charts
give
then.
them whatever you have at the end
the
of the night.
writing, yeah.
And say, this
is
is
our
the,
draft.
our current draft, we'll have the final version on Monday
It's a
night.
good point.
And then I can look at it on Saturday,
Yeah, that's exactly right. Let's do that.
Maybe.
I think that's much,
Sunday,
or Sunday, or Monday morning.
or Monday morning.
I tried to rewrite that last paragraph, turn it into a sentence. A third possibility might be to reduce the town's dependence on property taxes as a revenue stream for the town. Unfortunately, the trend is bad here with property tax levy comprising a larger component of the town's revenue almost every year. Action by the Board of Selectmen in this regard might consist of lobbying state legislators to increase local aid or allow more leeway to levy local taxes. I'm just gonna get rid of like local option meals, or levy local taxes, period.
Yeah.
And the question is, do we even need that last sentence? Just say, unfortunately, the trend is bad here with the property tax levy comprising a larger component almost every year.
That may be good enough.
Well, I think it's a good point, though.
Just remind them that there's,
But they should be lobbying the legislature?
Well, we're making a point of it,
Right.
of something.
for nothing, when was the last time you saw our legislators in,
Who?
here in front of them?
Legislators.
No, they haven't, I guess they haven't done it recently.
No, but I think they go to the legislatures.
Well,
Not the same.
I hope so.
okay.
They did
They used to
talk
bring
to
them,
them.
they used to
probably
bring them
talk to
in
them
Used
once
to
a
bring
year.
'em in
Really?
once a year.
once a year.
Tom anyway. And Jim usually.
Corey was usually there.
Was she?
Yeah.
Maybe we'll have to go, that's right, they haven't been doing it, and the league used to bring in legislators once a year, and we sort of stopped it because it felt like they were coming in, we would have them in for a
Right.
meeting, and the board of selectmen would have them in for a meeting, and it seemed like it was totally redundant. But if they aren't doing it
If
anymore,
nobody's-
then maybe we ought to be doing it.
So I did, there's one last thing in the summary, the first paragraph of the summary, I added, in recent years, right at the end, the last sentence, in the recent past, the board has chosen to have a single tax rate, but they are legally justified in deciding to split the rate to reduce residential taxes, to manage the levy split, or for no reason at all.
Yes.
Did I say no explicit reason
Well-
at all?
I don't understand why you would say that.
Well, it's good,
I think that-
There has to be a reason.
it goes back to the legislative intent question, right? That, and again, the idea that you might have different, you might be using different strategies. You might have different thoughts in your head
But there's a
about why
reason.
you're doing it. Well, I think it might be helpful if we are concerned, and I am at least, of whether the board can sustain a long-term project with tax rates. Sometimes it's easier to do stuff like that if you talk about why you're doing it.
That's true.
I'm,
Maybe no reason at all is not the way to go, but any other reason.
I'm having, see, when I first read it, and I'm putting, they are legally justified to split the tax rate to reduce residential taxes, and that is what you mean to split the tax rate in order to reduce
Yes.
in order, do you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
I was ready to put a comma there and have 4 clauses,
Right,
and
mhm.
that isn't what you mean.
Right, no, it's not. But I
Okay.
can put in order to,
Yeah,
or to manage.
or for,
Yeah, well, so in order to reduce residential taxes, or to manage the levy split, or for
I know.
any other reason.
or for no reason at all.
I think I'll give them any other reason. I don't want them turning into nihilists.
Political reason, well, I guess,
Right.
reduce, anyway.
Yeah,
Okay, however you want to put it, just so it's clear that we're talking about reasons for splitting the tax rate.
right. Okay. All right,
And then you're writing a conclusion.
nope, I am not.
No, he's got to eliminate
Yep.
that word at the end,
Good.
and that last page.
That's
that's
what I was
currently
gonna
there.
say.
Yeah, no, I think that's,
Oh, come on, lights.
Helen, I think if you just move over a little, I think it'll turn on.
Well,
there it is.
Excellent.
That's why I didn't do it the other weeks, because somebody was always sitting there.
Is this in Arial 11?
It is, almost all of it is. Some of the cut and paste stuff that I got today is not. So, but I'll make sure it is all in Arial 11.
Well, if you
all-
made it 10,
all
you'd
in
have
black.
less page.
it'd also be harder for us
Yeah.
old people to read. have to pull out my reading glasses all the time.
Okay. Monday night, we have the presentation to the board. Somewhat optimistically, I left room on the agenda for press questions, but I think we don't need that. So,
Can I,
Yeah,
just, John had given us this piece of paper that talked about what his comments to the
yeah.
person who appointed him.
yeah.
Is it clear to the person to whom this is directed, et cetera, that those are his personal views and not a committee perspective?
Should be.
I understand that, and I know it says therefore I recommend, but I guess I would have liked to have seen a stronger, this is my personal view.
To and
That's what he
from.
said in the subject, my recommendation.
Well,
I know, he says, I
I mean, I know you-
you know what? I'm sorry. I read the second page and didn't read the first page.
well,
I'm sorry, I was reading,
I
Actually,
agree
let's-
with you, even having read it.
Oh.
It's not that clear.
it's not that clear. Yeah.
well, let's talk just a moment then about what we're gonna do with the selectmen. Some kind of PowerPoint presentation. I wasn't planning on putting charts or graphs up, though. Mostly just kind of bullet the summaries as,
Can I
as
ask
the
this
talking
first?
points.
Where did he tell you we were going to be on this agenda? Because we could be here till 3 a.m.
I don't think so. I didn't look, but he did say he'd try to get us in first or
that's
early.
good.
I mean, we're not going to be in front of the proclamations or the
No, but if we're
One-day liquor
after, if
licenses.
we're after the gas guy who was on for
Right.
an hour last week, we're up creek.
Right.
I don't even know if you have to have slides.
I would think not.
I think you can just verbalize
Yes.
some of the points
Okay.
and don't make it lengthy. Just,
Yeah, no, I think a short presentation is in order. If they want to ask some questions, they can ask some questions.
exactly, because
But-
they have the material.
Right.
Right.
But this is, I mean, the report is what we're here for.
Yep.
And we're delivering that to them. Okay. I mean, and, you know, perhaps the conclusion of the talk is we are not giving you any conclusions.
Why
We're
does
not
it
giving
have
you
to
any
be,
recommendations, right?
why
But-
does it have to be in their packet on Friday?
So they can have it on Monday.
Well, I think,
We're gonna give it to them
So
on
they can
Monday.
look at it.
I
for
think
Monday.
the hope is
Please.
that
Wanna look through it.
they'll review it and ask well-prepared questions. That's
You
really,
need to give them that option.
yeah, we need to get, that's a
I'm
good way to
sorry,
say
we
it.
don't.
As I said, I can't be there on Monday, so.
Yeah. The other thing I thought I would tell them is that if they wanna meet with people one-on-one, or, I can't promise a group, but if they wanna follow up and ask individual questions, then I'm open to that. If somebody has a question about deepening their understanding.
Oh, I can't wait for
or-
them to meet with me one-on-one.
Well, I mean, they're gonna have to, right?
To get back to the John's memo,
Yeah.
I think it's huge. It sets quite an influence. And I just, I want it to be validated that it is his opinion
Mm-hmm.
and not the committee's, with whomever reads it.
With whoever reads it. Yeah.
I mean, it's directed to one person, and I understand that.
But I
But
don't,
he has very
Yeah,
specific
well,
recommendations.
that said, I mean, it's a public communication, so. All right, well, I guess I would accept suggestions for some kind of a concluding statement to the selectmen. That help make it clear what the recommendations of the committee are, as opposed to individual
Can I
members.
ask, I wasn't around, and,
Yeah.
my appointment came as
Yeah.
from the
Yeah,
assessors and from Sam, and I didn't see the appointment process for the rest of you. Were each, you get the FinCom appointment, but were all of you appointed by a specific member of the Board of Selectmen?
Well, not really. They kind of went around and
Pick names out of the list they had.
yeah, they had something like 11 or 13 applications, and then they decided they were going to put 4 on, and that meant Pat didn't get one because she was going to be on. I mean, I think my guess is that they worked it that way because that was the easiest way to do it, as opposed to having
So whoever it
up
was
or down
that
votes.
said your name, you don't
Right.
feel an obligation to report back to that person
Not
individually?
especially. I mean, again, I'm willing
Well,
to
I will
talk to
tell
any
you-
one of them, but
That the person that appointed me had to tell me the other day that they appointed me. I said, you did?
Well, that's why I'm asking.
I said, I don't have an obligation to you. I wanted to get on the committee because of why I wanted, but you picked my name. I didn't think that, it meant I had an obligation to tell you what I felt.
no, I mean,
That's what that's.
my understanding from how the committee was being constituted was that there were selectmen appointments along with appointments from other boards, but that I was appointed by the selectmen as a whole, not a particular one.
Yeah, that's what I always
okay.
think is usual. But that's why I'm just asking the
Yeah.
question, because John apparently felt he had an obligation or something to report to.
Right. Well, I mean, I think he was trying to be transparent about it. But, you know, he could have
I
sent
appreciate-
the email and
I
not
appreciate-
and not mentioned it. So I think he's trying to you know.
I think
what he
each
felt was right.
selectman said the name of the person they were appointing that night that we were
Right.
appointed.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't pay any attention to who said my name.
Well, I was
Yeah.
just asking whether others felt an obligation to report back to the person who had said their name. And you're saying no.
I do not have
I
that.
will steal a line from the television movie series with Tom Selleck. Jesse Stone, you can hire me and you can fire me, but you can't tell me what to do.
Well, that's why I asked that night, what,
Yeah.
that's why I
But
asked.
okay, I mean, I just, maybe just as a committee, we have no specific, recommendations.
Well,
From
Individual,
where I come from.
individual members may,
we do have a couple of recommendations.
other than what's in the what's stated in there. We
Yeah, right. What's right? The report is the totality of the
Of our
committee recommendations.
And
In
in
fact,
terms,
what I was thinking of really was we'd been asked to report back on specific things that they could work on, and we do say some of that, but it's not exactly a recommendation.
well, but I
really.
mean, I'm just saying
Yeah.
this particular thing
Right.
recommends specific numbers.
Right.
And that's
Right.
what I
Right.
had an issue with,
It's not our intention,
too.
this is a statement, not a question,
Yeah.
not to have a specific recommendation
As a group.
as a group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's what I thought. And to be honest with-
I'll stand with the last sentence, which is that it's the right and the responsibility of the selectmen
To make
to
that
make that decision.
Right.
based
Because
on
I don't,
6 miles of paper.
Yeah, you're right, and
I've
we've got
said-
Everything behind it.
I've said every night in this group, and I can't tell you if we were to poll who would and who would not, because one minute I have one feeling and the next minute I have another. And so I can't tell you. I think my deciding factor was a gentleman that stood here last week, on Tuesday night, not last week. I wish he was here first. But I can't tell you as a group if 4 would feel this way or 2 would feel that. I can't tell you.
Right.
Well, I came here at the beginning thinking the data would say it, the data would spell it out, and the data has not spelled it out completely. There are so many gray areas, and, I'm just hoping that people will understand things a little bit better through the report, through our discussions, and that the selectmen will certainly, I know, take as much into consideration of their citizenry and commercial residents as possible.
Another thing that I would like to say, if we're not still on the air, and I think we still are, that the vote that was taken last spring was a binding vote to just bring this committee together. It was not that the majority of the people thought their taxes were going to be cut in half, or whatever they thought. That was not what that vote was.
No, I mean, I think the vote was a genuine, would you like to see
A
a
split
split
rate.
tax rate? And who wouldn't vote for lower taxes? Because that's what a split tax
Right.
rate means. But the expectation that it would happen, I don't, if anybody had that, then they were wrong.
There's a lot of people that have that, and I've heard it many times over, but the biggest one was I heard it at the selectmen's meeting the night of everything on Buckman, when those people were talking behind me, and I stood up and said, I'm on the committee, I don't know what you're talking about. Where are you getting this information? Because we need to hear what you think. And they said, oh, we took a vote on it, and I had to explain the vote. And I know that they didn't know what I was talking about. They didn't think it was a non-binding vote. It said non-binding, but they didn't understand that.
Well,
The thing is, with a vote like that, the residents vote, but those that own businesses don't always get that opportunity. So it's, obviously, the residents are gonna vote in their favor.
Well, people that own businesses vote.
Not as, but the.
Well, the ones that own the smaller businesses that live in Chelmsford, yes. I know what you're saying now, yes.
anyway.
Yeah, but that's,
So,
I just
Yep.
my feeling after
Fine.
having read that, after having read one side of his paper. I don't know why that was sort of the last
I think
bit.
that's crazy.
Well, it said, and I looked at it now, and much of what it said on the second side was said on the first side, so.
well, I just wanna thank you all for being so wonderful on this committee.
yeah.
Very open-minded, and the work
I think
is
this has been.
tremendous.
I think
The
this
work
has
everybody
been-
else did was
everybody did a
phenomenal.
lot of work, and yeah, this was a great adventure.
And I think we all changed minds, and it's a back and forth a
Yeah.
number of times.
Right.
Or
Right.
anyway, move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.